to introduce our guest for this hour, former Israeli Consul General in Los Angeles, Yaki Dayan, here with me in the studio, and Professor Chuck Freilich, senior researcher at INSS with over 20 years of experience working in Israel's national security establishment. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us. Yaki, I'll start with you. We're seeing the flames getting higher between Jerusalem and Washington. It's not good for both sides. What should be done, can be done to lower those flames?
So, as you mentioned, National Security Advisor Jack Sullivan is coming tomorrow to Israel, and he has a long list of items on the agenda. Hostages, war in Gaza, Lebanon, Houthis, many items, and there are a lot of differences here. And Israel has to manage correctly their discussion with Washington in order to create more leverages and to create much more time in order to continue the war in Gaza. So when we speak about time in Gaza, definitely the Americans want to see more humanitarian aid coming into Gaza. They want to see a different kind of war in the southern part of Gaza than in the northern part of Gaza, less bombing from the air. And what they want to hear really is the day after. What Israel is planning for the day after. They want to hear the vision, as your correspondent mentioned correctly, not only the no's, but also the yes. What Israel is saying, how Israel is planning, and definitely he wants to hear the timetable that Israel is planning, especially for the intense phase that is happening now, meaning Khan Yunis and entering the and finishing the Khan Yunis and what's going on afterwards, because the United States doesn't want to enter publicly into a disagreement, into a clash with Israel on those issues. They understand that eventually Israel will continue till the end of the intense phase, so they want to reach discrete agreements. But as Blinken, as Secretary of State Blinken mentioned when he was in Israel, it's a matter of weeks and not months.
Chuck Freilich, in New York, probably it seems different from the other side of the Atlantic, but in Israel, some people are very much concerned when it comes to, arguments between Jerusalem and Washington. Some might be very happy because it shows, that the Prime Minister has courage, standing firmly against the U.S. President.
Well, I don't think anyone should be happy. Our relationship with the United States is a critical factor, a critical component in Israel's national security strategy. Always has been, at least for the last half century, and it will be for a long time to come. We cannot allow ourselves to be in a situation of significant friction with the United States, especially in a situation in which I must say President Biden's response has been phenomenal. We really could not have asked more of an American president to date. It's been very strong military support, strong diplomatic support, including veto in the Security Council, political support, and a huge arms package, which has not yet been approved, but I imagine will be soon. So we have a president who defines himself as a Zionist and really is a lifelong friend of Israel's, and the position that he's taken could not have been better. Well, now it seems to me, and I've felt this way for about the last month, that the Prime Minister, as part of his effort to save his political future, is resorting to a tactic that he's used many times before and successfully, which is to create some sort of straw man adversary. No, it's not really an adversary, but to build something up to make it look like an adversary. And in this case, that's the U.S. and President Biden specifically. And I think what he's beginning to do already is to position himself. He's the good guy fighting Israel's battle against American pressure. Well, there is, of course, some pressure that we have to stand up to, or it's legitimate for Israel to do so. But it's very limited. Basically, what we have to do is adapt Israeli policy to, in the end, what Washington needs as well. Because without American support, we'd been in very difficult circumstances today, even more. The deployment of 2 U.S. aircraft carrier groups is probably what has deterred Hezbollah and Iran from expanding this war even more.
But Chuck, you're saying correctly that that the American deterrence works against our enemies, mainly Iran and Hezbollah. The famous "don't" that President Biden said about a month and a half ago, or a bit more. But currently in Israel, the common thinking within the administration is that "don't" was not only aimed at Tehran and Beirut, but at Jerusalem as well, telling us Israelis, don't attack.
Well, don't attack what? Don't expand the war.
Don't attack Hezbollah. Don't expand the war to the northern front as well.
Correct. And there's a very serious debate going on in Israel, a substantive debate, whether, since the war has already begun, we're fully mobilized. The U.S. has deployed the aircraft carriers. And since we can no longer tolerate the kind of situation that we had on the northern border, given the experience in Gaza, then maybe this is the appropriate time to take on Hezbollah as well. And other people, of course, are saying, well, that's too much for the traffic to bear. A one-front war is more than enough. I think the American position here is very clear. It, of course, doesn't determine our policy, but it has to be a significant consideration.
Yes.
And I think at the moment, what the administration is doing, and we see this with Biden's statement yesterday, and a whole series of statements from the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, that they're setting limits in time. Nobody has set a firm date yet, but they're telling us that we have weeks, not more. And the more that we shape our tactics in a way that serves American interests, in other words, minimizing casualties, increasing humanitarian aid, that will allow the U.S. to give us a little bit more time.
Yes, Yaki Dayan, so I want to follow up on Chuck Freilich's recent remarks. Two questions. A, when he says weeks, or they say weeks is 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 50 weeks, what do we mean? And how do we finish the unfinished business in the north if we have to go via Washington to reach Beirut?
Yeah, so I'll start with the north because this is a very significant question. I think that the discussion tomorrow with Jack Sullivan would be, if you are not going to remove Radwan forces and Hezbollah forces from the fence at least 4 or 5 miles, then the only option that Israel has is to start a war, which definitely not in an election year. The United States doesn't want to see that. So they are intensifying their diplomatic efforts together with the French. They are doing their utmost to come with some kind of an idea, some kind of a solution in order to make sure that there is a buffer zone created in the north, because Israel is serious. They understand that Israel understands that it cannot go back to the status quo that existed on October 6th. And then we have more than 100,000 refugees from the north. They want to go back to their homes. So the only other option to diplomatic efforts headed by the United States is a larger scale of war up in the north.
But a follow-up on that, a quick one, Yaki. Why should we believe an international solution? We've seen this 1701 resolution from 2006 ending the Second Lebanon War. At the time, there were two no's, a no to an embargo on weaponry to Hezbollah, and a no to an army deployment south to the Litani River. Both were just, dispensed by Hezbollah. They do whatever they want. Why should we believe?
You are 100% right. I mean, mentioning the 1701, that was not the resolution, that was never fulfilled. The assurances will have to come from the Americans. Not, I heard about all kinds of ideas of a larger UNIFIL force that will keep the Radwan forces away from the fence. Those kinds of suggestions cannot work. Only strong American assurances can make the Israelis understand that this is an option. But otherwise, we are headed for another large-scale war up in the north.
And the question regarding the south, weeks means what?
Weeks means that tomorrow the IDF and the chief of the IDF will present his plans for the next phase, for the intense phase, explaining the Americans exactly how much time is needed to complete this mission, which includes definitely the northern part of Gaza, but also Khan Yunis, releasing the hostages, and what will be considered as eradicating at least the infrastructure, the military and administrative infrastructure of the Hamas. So that would give also a timetable. I would say that at least till the end of January.
So what I hear, but it's my ears, so I'm responsible only for them, 10th of January, by the beginning of the new year, after all the people come back to work, you know, in Europe and the US. That's what I hear. That's what they're saying about the intensified side. Yeah. Then we'll go in and out again.
I doubt it, Yoav, because, you know, as long as we are not at least achieving few of the goals, even politically, it would be impossible for the Prime Minister to stop on January 10th.
Chuck Freilich, your thoughts regarding that? Those dates, weeks, what would Washington say if Israel comes with 31st of January?
Well, I think you're right. The preference is for something like January 10th when everyone comes back from the New Year break. But if Israel ends up needing another week or two or even 3, I don't think that that's what will be critical. The administration wants to see an end game in Gaza. They don't see it. They are, I think, increasingly doubtful and justifiably whether we really can achieve our military objectives, whether we can destroy Hamas as a coherent military force. I don't like the term destroying and eradicating and whatever, because that's not, it's unlikely we can achieve that. It's even becoming questionable whether we can destroy them as a coherent military force and topple them as the governing body. So what do we want? We don't want the PA. Who do we want? As has already been mentioned, Israel's got lots of no's, but no yeses. And there's growing frustration with the Prime Minister, even some suspicion that he may wish to prolong the fighting for political reasons, that the escalation, if it happens in the north, could also be politically motivated. And I think the administration is very, very much against that. So we may be heading to something of a, I don't want to say a crisis in relations, but significant tension in another few weeks.
Can I offer you another date?
Yeah.
Which is before the State of the Union, which is the beginning of February. That would be the date that the president would aim for.
So you still speak about the end of January. Yes. We speak about the beginning of January, something in between. I believe that after tomorrow, we'll know more after Jack Sullivan's visit to Israel. He's meeting with the Prime Minister, Prime Minister of Defense, with the cabinet. He's about to sit their meeting tonight to prepare for that meeting and to take decisions. I believe we will know much more tomorrow. Chuck Freilich in New York, Yaki Dan here with me in the studio. Thank you so much for making the time and speaking to us this evening.